Simon, Simon, listen. Satan has demanded to sift all of you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your own faith may not fail. So, we're going to talk today about the temptation to give up on Jesus, but more importantly, how Jesus prays for us that we can stay close to him and always love him. No one right now is going to kill us for following Jesus. That might come in the future. But in the meantime, how will Satan tempt us to lose faith? So I can think of 5 typical examples. First one would be scandal. Would scandal, like something like the sex abuse crisis, would that ever make you turn away from Jesus and the Eucharist? Second one is being too busy for Jesus. Just slowly over time, we just have more important things. Third, suffering. Some tragedy enters our life and we get really discouraged and we fall. Fourth, there are certain relationships, there's some people in our lives that we love, they make it really hard for us to follow Jesus. And then sometimes, very common, someone at a church hurts us and we're gone. And finally, cultural pressure. So the church's teaching feels like out of sync with society and we want to go with everyone else. So here are 3 truths from today's Passion narrative that should strengthen us. So truth number 1, make a commitment and ask Jesus for the grace to be faithful. So St. Peter says, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. So that's a wonderful commitment, very sincere. The problem with that is it's only half. He doesn't ask Jesus for the grace. He should have said, Lord, help me. Help me to make sure I stay faithful to you until prison and to death. So Pope Benedict pointed out that St. Peter, he did not rely on grace enough. Last November, about 300 of us, we put up our hands saying, we have chosen to make Jesus the center of our life. That is a commitment, good for you. Try to ask Jesus for grace to stay faithful to that. And if you haven't yet made a commitment to make Jesus the center of your life, you might want to think about that, doing that this week. Holy Week, there's no better time. Second truth, the temptation to fall away from Jesus usually comes with repeated pressure. So the text points out that St. Peter broke down under repeated accusations. It didn't happen from one person. It says 3 separate people over the course of an hour. I never knew that. It was extended. So this actually represents how our culture slowly puts pressure on us, and over time, we lose faith. In the past 2 years, there have been repeated crises in our culture, one after the other, and some people are losing faith. So the first one was COVID. We talked about how some people actually prioritize their physical health over spiritual. Physical health is important, but spiritual always has to be number 1. And then some people became lukewarm. And then there is the death of George Floyd. Made a lot of people very emotional, and they were just acting almost without thinking. So some people, even in Canada, said, defund the police. And then there was a residential school outrage, and a lot of Catholics reacted without thinking. Some people were saying on social media, the bishop should apologize, but they had apologized. Every single one of them had already apologized in whose diocese they had a residential school. The point is, people were acting emotionally. They weren't staying calm, they weren't thinking. You know, the way things are going, I think in our society, there's going to be another crisis in 12 months. And there's going to push people to react like emotionally and not follow their faith. And it could lead them away from Jesus. Number 3, failure is not irrevocable. If we fall away from Jesus, we can always come back. And that's great. So the text says that Peter went out and wept bitterly. That means Jesus' prayer for him worked. Jesus prayed for Peter. St. Peter fell away, but he never stopped loving Jesus. He did come back. So Pope Benedict said that the arrogant man learns humility, and he comes back home, and in 3 weeks, on the 3rd week of Easter, we're going to hear when Jesus recommits himself to Jesus, and he says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Hopefully not. I hope no one will ever fall away from Jesus. but it's very possible that some of us could. And if we do, never be discouraged, always come back, because he's so compassionate. His mercy is inexhaustible. You can always come home. And Jesus prays today, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And that applies to us too. One of the most beautiful things about our faith is that we have saints who betrayed Jesus and then came back and still became saints. So there's this Korean saint named Saint Alexius U Seong, 22 years old when he died for Jesus, a layman, not a priest. He died in 1866. So at the end of his life, in the village where he was staying, all the Catholic males were rounded up, arrested, and put in prison. And under that pressure, Saint Alexius denied Jesus, so they let him go. But his heart changed, and he repented. He started fasting. He went to a bishop who himself was in prison, and he went to confession. And as soon as he met the bishop in prison, they arrested him, tortured him, and they executed him. The beautiful thing is that even people who deny Jesus can still become saints. And so we've got a lot of examples of that. St. Peter, 9 other apostles did that. Other guys like St. Paul the Hermit, and a few others have done that. So Jesus' power is greater than our failure. And he prays for us that our faith may not fail. And even if it does, we can, with his grace, turn back.